welcome everybody. This is the Autodesk Community Conversations. If you are new to this and haven't joined before, basically what we do here is we try and connect our customers and our community with expert speakers from not only Autodesk, but also the Autodesk community. And basically it is a place to share knowledge, make a connection, and have a conversation about our products. This is quickly just the safe harbor statement. I'm just going to pause and let you guys take a quick read through this. Basically, at the end of all of it, it's just don't make any future purchasing or decisions like that based on what is said here during our community conversations today. Without further ado, I will hand it over to the main speakers for the day, and Saul and Jacob can take it from here.
Cool. So welcome everyone. My name is Jacob Small. I'm a implementation consultant for Autodesk based out of Stockholm, Sweden, and describe myself as a Dynamo forum junkie because you'll see me helping people at all hours of the night over on the Dynamo bin forums.
Hello everyone, my name is Saul. I'm a product manager working on Dynamo. I describe myself as a curious human being and I'm currently based in Boston, Massachusetts, but I'm originally from New Zealand. Over to you, Dana.
I am Dana DeFilippi. I am based out of Washington, D.C., really on the Virginia side where I grew up. I'm a computational specialist at Smith Group, and I am hoping that my dog will make an appearance at some point today. He usually does.
All right, and Marco.
I can't wait to see Leo. So I'm Marco Barboza, originally from San Jose, Costa Rica. I live now in San Francisco. I'm an application developer at Smith Group, and I like to think of myself as a burrito connoisseur.
That sounds
Love them burritos.
All right, so without further ado, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our 50th, quite a milestone actually, session for Dynamo Office Hours. We are getting on the same page today, talking about all things Dynamo and how to sort of manage that and make sure we're all on the same page. So excited for the session today with Dana and Marco taking lead and Jacob jumping in. I am going to be essentially a ghost or a fly on the wall, hanging out and chatting. The session will follow the standard practice. We're going to have more of a presentation today, less of a live demonstration, but we do encourage that conversation. So while there is technically a Q&A session at the end, please do interrupt with questions throughout. And with that, over to you guys.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off by sort of setting the stage for why this is all important. And the big reason is, people have kind of been a little bit jaded by the simplicity of your iPhones and iPods, right? We just expect our technology to work. Most people in the office can benefit quite a bit from the tools that we produce, be they full Dynamo graphs, custom nodes, or whatever else they are. But most people in the office, actually by far the majority of the people in the office, aren't going to be able to sort of modify those tools to make them work in their environment if whatever you hand them isn't ready to go out the gate. As such, pretty much always now the ask is for, we just want to push play and get results sort of solution, rather than something that I can open up and then start to configure and make it work, and then we're good to go. So let's wanted to sort of frame up the conversation today around that, and then hand it over to Dana, who's going to talk a little bit about how she has managed this stuff in the past. So Dana, on to you.
Thank you guys so much, Jacob and Sol. I really appreciate Autodesk Community. I will say, shout out to Richard Schmidt, who's on the call today. I've given this presentation with him in the past. Very grateful for him and his work and role in all of this. So to start, why, right? Why do we even use Dynamo Player? And really the main reason would be, not everybody wants to be in Dynamo, right? We probably have about 5% of our staff of Smith Group, which is quite large, that are actually originators or even modifiers within Dynamo itself. So essentially, we want everybody to use these tools, the types of tools that we create within Dynamo, specifically for Revit, whether it be for documentation or what have you. So the way that we do that is with Dynamo Player. So you can see Dynamo itself, not exactly the most intuitive environment. I will say that first time I opened it, I definitely closed it very quickly. And took me a while, I will say, to get to where I am now. Shout out to a lot of the Autodesk University and other online platforms where you can learn about Dynamo. So rather than having everybody inside of Dynamo and understanding our color groupings, which I'll go over later, we get into Dynamo player. So you can see here, we actually, which once again, I'll talk about this script, have it formatted so that it's hopefully very intuitive, for makes these types of workflows very easy for just everybody to jump in to use if you're in Revit. One of the first scripts, and you can see I actually cheat with a 0 for the name of the script to get it the first in line in Dynamo player, is open Dynamo resources. Not only is this page on SharePoint and hopefully very easily accessible to all staff through our technology hub, but you can also open up this script and you can see there that the first toggle is open Eureka article on Dynamo workflows, which is the platform we call Eureka on our technology hub. So this essentially, by keeping true and running the script, will open up this Eureka article online. The other toggle there, Seek Help on Teams, will actually open up our tip help desk so that you can create a post. Maybe you have a question, maybe you're not able to get the script to run as properly as intended, or just in general, you want help. Maybe you want somebody to kind of walk through it with you for the first time, make sure that you do it correctly. So totally understandable. We make it easy so that you can get to either the article or the help on help desk right here within that script. These two, at least one of them, the Seek Help toggle, is in every script within Dynamo Player from 2023 on. We tried to build them into 2022, but we really caught on within 2023 in that major platform update. So essentially here, unless these two toggles, or at least one of them, the Seek Help, there may not be an article that supports that specific workflow. And if not, then it will just have the Seek Help toggle. So if these resource toggles, or the toggle for Seek Help, is not turned to false, we expect that you need help. You don't know what you're doing. So we have essentially made it so that no changes will be made to the Revit model, and you'll actually get in the outputs down below, Seek Help / review documentation. So once these are actually turned to false, then you can actually interact with the script as intended, run it, and get Revit to probably do what you had hoped. You'll also see that the documentation for work sets specifically is tied to our collaboration process. So if you're collaborating a Revit model up to BIM 360, this is one of our steps, actually opening up Dynamo Player and creating our work sets. So with that, essentially, when you collaborate a Revit model, just in general, right out of the box, you're going to get shared levels and grids in work set 1. We've made it so that, of course, once these resource toggles are turned to false, you have two options there, which discipline you are, as well as whether you want to create the optional work sets. We have some finish and other kinds of interior work sets that are optional. By default, they will automatically be created with all work sets. And once you click run, you'll get the scripts. Not only will it tell you which work sets are not viewed, which will automatically uncheck any work set with not viewed in the name. Every discipline at Smith Group has a not viewed work set that does not show up by default. And this is actually tied back to our standard documentation practices. But the secondary output that you cannot see, you can only see the header for, actually lists all of the work sets that were created. Of course, you can open up the work set dialog box as I have and see that the changes have been made, which you probably should do, right? Anytime that you run a script, just go ahead and ensure it did what you intended. So making it very easy. So essentially, the way that we format this is with a few different inputs. And as you can see there, the full output list, right? And essentially, in Dynamo Player, or I'm sorry, Dynamo, in the authoring side or even modifying side, we have some standard documentation practices that allow us to kind of format our inputs this way. You can see that our resource toggles have an underscore prefix so that they show up at top, right? Always. We do have kind of a numbering sequence if the script calls for it. Sometimes, you kind of want people to run through scripts in their inputs in kind of a sequence, if you will, a specific sequence that makes most sense, trying to make it very intuitive, right? And once again, always trying to inform the user as to what actually happened with the script, with the outputs there. You can see here within Dynamo itself, we do have some standard grouping and colors associated to those standard groupings. When you create a group within Dynamo itself, just by default, it kind of creates this lime color. So that's our main color, right? So if you create a group, it automatically is select elements or get data from Revit. So we've defaulted that one to be just the out of the box kind of standard colored, because as you can see here, it typically happens to be the one that you're grabbing the most from Revit, right? You're getting data, selecting elements. Anytime that you're making changes, it's going to be in orange. So those are actually very easy to find in terms of what transactions are actually occurring within Revit. We can zoom into the orange areas and backtrack from there, see where our issues are occurring. Any user inputs or specifications are going to be in pink, so that we can ensure that those are formatted properly so that they show up correctly in Dynamo Player. Same with our gray reporting for the outputs. Not all of our reporting end up being outputs. I'll talk about that in a moment. We do sometimes just kind of like to report certain information as we work through a script, especially if it happens to be a really hefty one that's going through a lot of different processes, grabbing a lot of information, filtering it down, doing those types of things. Sometimes we like to create snapshots of data. And then kind of the in between is the purple. You can kind of see there that we have the dictionaries and the miscellaneous data. Sometimes we'll use blue if we have a lot of kind of information being manipulated in interesting ways. Like I said, dictionaries are something that we like to utilize quite a bit for data manipulation and other things. So these are usually where we would create purple color groupings. That usually captures about everything. Inputs, you can see here using in 2023, of course, the pinned note. You can see the specified discipline with its disciplines underneath with an integer toggle where I've actually set the max to be 6. Once again, just trying to make it the most usable. And for this specific use case, we only need 6 inputs as options. So customizing that to make sure that it's maximally effective for my user. So essentially just trying to work in this fashion, making sure that things are labeled and, kind of intuitive within Dynamo Player. This is definitely a process that we go through before we certify, as we call it at Smith Group. As we certify a script, is making sure that it actually is legible and intuitive through Dynamo Player. And not only through the inputs, but also through the outputs. So you can see on the next one here, that we have the outputs, and of course, right clicking on either the input or the output node and making it as such is input, is output, as you can see here with my output node. And really, once again, trying to demonstrate for my user what's actually occurring when they run that script. I will say that these types of things do cut down fear quite a bit. People are sometimes fearful of like, oh my gosh, what happens if, right? Well, first off, we have the safeguards or those resource toggles that I've built in to every script, and we try to incorporate with every script, right? So once again, unless those are turned to false, nothing's going to occur within Revit. And then once actually something doesn't occur within Revit, not only does it display here within your outputs, but usually within documentation, it will also display to you how to double check, right? Whether it's through a schedule, whether it's through the tag into information, whatever it might be that might indicate like, hey, this worked. Open up the workset dialog box, right? Whatever it might be that actually kind of applies to that specific workflow and what's actually been automated. So Dynamo Player within 2023 and newer versions, of course, has folders, which are awesome. So our giant long list of scripts, we can now start to consolidate. I will say the majority of our scripts actually do live in that first _SG folder. So we do, whenever we're kind of automating something, we like to think about all of our disciplines, all of our workflows. Could this be used for maybe something more than just the use case at hand or what it's intended to be used for? Could the lighting designers use this for light fixtures, whereas the science and technology group is using it for casework, right? Could we think about this in different ways? If not, if it's a script that's actually specific to a workflow, we'll throw it in a Smith Group folder that's intended for its specific. I will say that's also a Richard, the Rave. He's really wonderful with the naming and the nomenclature of things. So go Richard with Rave. And so you can see here with all of these different things, and we actually do have a Rave article on our technology hub as well. So all of these kind of have a documentation piece that ties to how these workflows are intended to be used and how the automation piece fits in.
All right, so I wanted to jump in real quick and make a note on sort of annotating and documenting custom nodes, because Dana has done a really good job outlining how they manage the full graphs at Smith Group in terms of annotation and documentation, but we haven't really touched on custom nodes as much yet, and they're super important. So brief interlude, and then we'll hand it back over here in a minute. So first up, anytime you've got any kind of custom code, basically you've got these little micrographs as your custom nodes, or even Python documentation or zero-touch nodes that you've developed, you want to make sure you've got some documentation built into there. Basically, for your custom nodes, you want to do it basically just like you do for your regular Dynamo graphs, right? We want to make sure we've got our groups set up. Inputs, outputs should still be very clearly visible. Try and make sure all the data flow goes from on the left all the way over to the right, not sort of zigzagging back and across. Don't try and go top to bottom, just work left to right. Things typically read better that way. Make sure the logic flows there. Also, we want to make sure that our inputs and outputs have our data types sort of declared as what they should be, including any sort of default values that you might want to provide, and that you've given some tooltips. So we took a quick screenshot of the Dynamo primer here to indicate exactly what that looks like. So you can see we've got a couple inputs here. We've named the first one as X, second one as Y. Both of them are doubles. The default value for X is 2. The default value for Y is 10. And then both of them have a tooltip saying, by just creating a comment in the input node, first number or second number, right? Similarly, on the output nodes, we've got tooltip by creating a comment. That's the double backslash, resulting percentage of the two numbers. Output's name is percentage, right? That's sort of the really, really important piece, right? The next piece to go over is Python documentation. We always want to document any custom code to the lowest common denominator of the people who might be editing that code in the future. Reason I recommend that is because while it might work out fine for you to just document it now, and you'll know what you meant by your variable names and whatnot, maybe even if you pick it up in 6 months, it's unlikely that you'd be able to turn it over to the intern who just graduated last week or is on here joining you guys for the summer. So want to make sure that those people can come in and pick stuff as they are. So good Python documentation should look something like this, right? Maybe this is a bit too robust if you're doing, working at a professional development firm, stuff like that. But you can see I've commented basically every line, explaining exactly what that line is doing. I'm not using variable names that don't make sense. Variables are named stuff like name for the name of the element, or color for the color of the element, red for red, so on and so forth. Don't use things that are super abbreviated or just don't make common sense. The other thing to take note of here is I built this node in the latest version of Dynamo. So we've got 2.18 flow going on here, which is pretty great because it means I can start to make some changes to my Python nodes. So real quick highlight, if you don't have Revit 2024.1 yet, you're not going to be able to do this, but might be a good reason to get those upgrades going. So as always, we can rename our Python nodes to indicate exactly what it is that they're doing, but now we can also rename our inputs, outputs, and provide tooltips so that users understand exactly what that data is that they're going to get. A whole bunch of other changes too as well in the editor that you can see over here. It is much more robust, much more capable, and really a great system overall. So we'll try and get into that a little bit later. Maybe I'll show this off live if we have time. Then the last bit of information in terms of documenting our custom code is this. C# nodes, our zero-touch nodes and everything else. Now, those, because we are on an independent development environment, we want to be sort of certain that we're documenting towards those users. It's unlikely that the intern who just is on his summer break from architecture school is going to be jumping into an IDE to make changes there, so you don't have to worry about it quite so much. But you still want to make sure that you've got things as commented out as makes sense, and make sure your variable names make sense as well. This is as much for helping yourself in the future as it is for helping those next users. All right, thanks a lot, Dana. I think this next one actually goes over to Marco, maybe? Or is this still you, Dana?
I think either one of us could speak to it. I will say that this is something that we use quite often. You can see over on the left that we have Revit, Rhino, and Rhino inside, and with essentially like Jacob is talking about, with a little bit of custom node and code, we can essentially create a logger that reports back to us that we have displayed through Power BI in terms of what those tools are and who is using them. You can see that one of them in particular is way far exceeding the other, right? Maybe we need to create a button in Smith Group for it, in the Smith Group tab in Revit. Maybe we need to evolve that in some way, make it less run. Maybe we could have it run in batches or what have you, but also being able to talk to the users themselves in terms of how they're using the tools, figure out who are kind of our leaders in some of these automation processes, etc. So this is a very, very useful tool for us to have. And then I think it's over to Marco.
Oh yeah, and sorry. Hi Dana. You forgot to mention that we just hit the 20,000 run mark recently, right? Which, so in order to get all this awesome scripts that Dana and our computational team create, how do we deploy them to our entire office, right? So we want everyone to use them and benefit from the time savings. So do you want to keep going? So in order to manage, we manage our packages in the cloud. Sorry, yeah, you can talk about that one.
Sorry, it's a little back and forth on this bit. So yes, as Jacob was saying, sometimes there is some custom in-house code that needs to be created, whether for loggers or other pieces. We try actually not to rely on much of that. You can see I've attached in there, and sorry, the text kind of jumbled on top of the Dynamo screen there, but dynamopackages.com definitely talks about some of the most depended upon packages that we definitely employ, especially I see there's some Civil 3D users in the house, so definitely check those out. You can see here in my Dynamo window all of mine, including my Smith Group, which has my logger in there. And essentially, in addition to the logging tools, we have capabilities that allow us to track which packages and which nodes are in use, so that we can essentially say, okay, maybe this Archilab we have all over the place, right? We have that hundreds of times in every script, whatever it might be, versus a script that we might only, or a package rather, where we might only have one script with one node, right? Where we may not want to have to manage that, where it's very, very specific in its use case. So really kind of understanding first off how wide ranging and how far encompassing this package is used. Is it's really depended upon, as the Dynamo package manager is showing here, or is it something that maybe we can think about phasing out in some way. Also, there's ones that maybe aren't managed as well. We really wanted them to be used, right? They do awesome things, but maybe on the back end, the author isn't maybe updating them on a regular cadence, which I get it. Life happens. We appreciate that you created it in general, so we get it. But it just does rely upon us as managers of these types of tools to ensure that, is there new versions up to date, or maybe for the newest version of Revit, there's a more current one that employs the latest versions of code and the API. So it is part of our checks. And, as we're going through our scripts, we also kind of attach on checking through our packages to ensure that we're managing those in a proper way, that we're kind of keeping that list slim. Once again, we don't like to rely on those. And if there's a Revit or a Dynamo out of the box node for it, even if it's like 3 nodes, whereas it might be 1 from a package, I'm going to use the Dynamo nodes. This not only is much easier for me to manage across different versions, right? It doesn't require that I need a package, but also I find that it's easier for the people who maybe want to modify the script. It's easier for them to get in, to understand and break down what's happening across those 3 nodes, right? Piece by piece. And to Jacob's point, someone who isn't very great at code, hence in taking those slides, I definitely appreciate the notes, any kinds of things that you can think about for the people like me that need those laymen inside of the code. Very much appreciated.
Sorry, trying to find my mute button. Yeah, the less external dependencies you have, the more stable your code is going to be long term, right? It's reducing that technical debt. So try and keep away from packages. Don't utilize a package just because you can. Try and keep it kind of separate and on your own. So Marco, there is a question in chat that I'm hoping you might be able to store a little bit, perhaps provide some insight into. We keep mentioning this term robocopy. What's your thoughts on the best way to sort of copy content down onto the local system? Do we have a slide coming up on that, or do you want to talk about that?
So I think robocopy was
Is it 2 slides ago?
But it is a really good solution if you in order to deploy this content to your users. We don't use robocopy at Smith Group, but if you, because some people don't have the luxury to have our own in-house app, but this is a really good alternative for you. So
there's of course tons of ways of copying down data, and the idea is that you have a master repository, right, like Smith Group does, and we have our people like Marco on a development team that allow these types of tools to work, right? But if you don't have those types of people, you're a single person like me, as I've been in the past, you didn't have the ability to create an application to copy from SharePoint down to all of your local users. There are alternative ways, right? This is one way. You could even do it with a Dynamo script, right? That has it copy from a central server location down to your C drive. The idea is that you really probably should be operating off of your C drive. We at Smith Group, we actually write in the later versions in particular, we have written to where Dynamo expects things to go. Right? Where do the packages want to go? Where do the scripts want to be read from in Dynamo Player? Right now we have folders, we have all these fancy things in Dynamo Player, so it's a little bit different. We are having to push out our XML and JSONs and the application settings in the background of Dynamo to have Dynamo read these types of things. But the best idea would be for you to create some way for files to be copied from a central location down to a C drive so that Dynamo can read them in their expected locations. So figure out where those locations are and write to them. Marco, I don't know whether you can say that more eloquent or Jacob.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's exactly how we manage it. So let's move to the next. So yeah, So that's how we manage a lot of our settings. We have that central repository right now. We use SharePoint in the cloud, and we kind of orchestrate all our folders, all our configuration files, all our scripts and packages in there. And then we use our in-house app in order to deploy them to everything. So for example, in order for us to get that awesome drop down with the folders for every user, we manage that through an app settings JSON, where we just deploy that to every user's computer, and then through our app, and then it just happens for them, right? Just like the iPhone. So if you go to the next one, for example, this also allows us to handle multiple versions of Revit. I mean, Revit and other apps, but more essentially Dynamo. There are some changes from version to version. So for example, these folders were not present in 2022 and lower, but now we have this awesome drop down in 2023 that helps us organize our scripts, and then 2024, right? But the way 2023 was handling Revit 2023 with Dynamo 2.16 was handling it through a JSON. It was briefly being handled through the XML in Dynamo 2.17, and I think recently with 2024.1 and Dynamo 2.18, it went back to reading the JSON. That was like kind of like a slight hiccup, but like it helped us kind of like adapt and just like upload the required files and then distribute them as needed to the correct folders. So like I was saying, I keep talking about this app, this in-house app. This is our solution for deployment of these tools to the masses, essentially. So the way it works is, like I said, it has a central repository. In this case, it's SharePoint. All of our users can download this app through that we manage through a Microsoft's Software Center content management system. So they install it, and then all it does is, in simple words, just ask the cloud if there's any changes. Then the cloud will just send the latest content and just put it in the right locations within their machines. It does this by using the Microsoft Graph API, more specifically. And a shout out to Richard, because he helped a lot, and he pretty much built it. Like he helped, he built a lot of the system. And then another nice tool that came in handy recently was this Dynamo.PythonUpdater. So I built this one because we found ourselves in a situation where we wanted to change a line, in a Python line in all of our scripts, and we just didn't want to just go on ahead and just like open every single Dynamo script in order to change this Python line. So essentially, it's just a console app that searches for all your Dynamo files within folders or a group of folders, and then searches for that specific line of Python, replaces it, and then just saves your file. So it's available if you want to try it. I uploaded it to you.
Saved me tons of time.
So always happy to share my hacks.
I'm trying to get the web address into the chat, but it apparently did not like the way I've been typing it. So hopefully that works for somebody.
Oh, I'll just drop it in there if you want.
Thank you. That'd be great. Next sort of piece to go over in terms of other tools that we have for sort of bulk managing these things is our Graph Migration Assistant, which is a great new tool that's been developed by John Pearson in conjunction with the Dynamo team. Effectively, what this tool does is it's going to bulk open a bunch of your graphs and update them to whichever version that you're after. It's currently got a bit of an open beta. I don't know that we'd call it a formal finished release. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there. But yeah, it's still soliciting feedback and doing some great work with that in terms of the content that's there and what you can do with it. So basically, it will swap out the old if node for the new one and other tools like that, because we know this is kind of a big need for a lot of people. Towards that end, here's another video of it kind of in use. Once I hit play. There we go. You can see it's actually opening up each individual graph, adjusting the node sizes to take care of that size differential between Dynamo 2.12 and prior to 2.13, as well as a whole bunch of other tools, which is really cool, super useful in the fact that it's going to do everything kind of all at once in one big go round, which is great to know about. The next thing to keep in mind in terms of management stuff is testing. You want to make sure that you're putting your Dynamo graphs into some kind of testing environment every time you update your environment. And what do I mean by your environment? If you update Revit, you're going to want to check your Dynamo graphs. If you update your Dynamo, you're going to want to check your Dynamo graphs. If you update your Revit add-ins, you're going to want to check your Dynamo graphs. If you install a new add-in, you're going to want to check your graph. Update Windows, InfoSec changes, constantly testing. It's basically impossible. It's functionally impossible to do all the testing you have to do if you were to attempt to do it manually. That's why I recommend, as always, automating it. Towards that end, Dana and I at Built 2 years ago now, maybe, I don't remember, had a great session similar to this one where we put together a quick tool to sort of help with those sort of pieces. I have posted that up onto the Dynamo forums a few different places. First link I could find is there in the link, but basically it will allow you to build a replayable Dynamo Revit journal that you'll be able to just drag and drop individually or in bulk to get a new Revit session to open up, the model that your Dynamo graph is built to be tested on opened, and then open up Dynamo and execute the graph. You're watching the whole thing here in an animation. We're at a few seconds here, but basically you saw how the drag and drop works. Again, my mouse is not in action the entire time this is happening, and you can actually test 10 15 of these at once. I wouldn't recommend doing anything that's going to do any background processing on those and testing graphs in bulk that way, but the stuff that's running in conjunction, absolutely. So you can see here again, Dynamo's automatically opened up, and now it's going to open up the graph that I wanted to test. It's automatically hit run, and then we got run completed. So now I can come back.
That script looks familiar.
Yeah, probably. Now I can come back here and go and look at exactly what's happening. My intent was to change the case. Did the case on the title sheet change? In that case, yes. That means it's good to go. We can save it out to the ready to deploy, or if it had issues, we could sort of quickly adjust those issues, right? If we saw run completed with warnings or run completed with errors or whatever it might be, we can go and we can address those pieces directly. When it does fail, that's effectively what we're up to. We get to choose, do we want to fix it on the fly? If it's really simple, like, hey, we want you to use the new if node, okay, I can manually swap that out now if I didn't do it with the graph updater. Or if it's something that's an environment fix, maybe we just download the right package and make sure that's going to get deployed to the users. Or if it's something bigger, check out our Dynamo log, check out our Revit journals. If it's a really big problem though, I'm probably going to do a save as, put it in the not yet ready to deploy folder and come back to it later. All right, so we've had tons of back and forth. We're onto the live demo section. The one thing that I wanted to show, and I know we're going to have a whole bunch more questions, so let's get them in the chat or go ahead and raise our hands if we want to ask questions of Marco, Dana, myself, or Sol. While you think about what you might want to ask, I'm going to go ahead and launch Dynamo. We're going to take a quick look at our updated Python node. looking in the chat, there were a lot of things that came through while I was just talking there. So, Sol, was there anything we wanted to talk about?
Everything's been answered, I think. To my knowledge, there's been some good discourse on Robocopy. People are curious. Robocopy is a base Windows thing. You can tether it to PowerShell as well and have that essentially start up upon machine. So when a user opens their machine, they can do that copy before they even have access to Windows, which is a way to breed in consistency, which is good. So Patrick was talking about how they handle it, and they could do some things through Teams and get external collaborators to come in before IT shut that down. So that was fun for a while until it wasn't. And there's some other good conversations, some links coming through for the PythonUpdater and to the graph migration assistant as well, which we would love some feedback on. So if you do want to go and download that and have a go and find something that doesn't quite behave how you think it should, please put a issue into the GitHub repo and we'll take a look.
Cool. All right, so I did want to show the Python updates in 2.18. So you can see I've launched Revit, launched up Dynamo. I'm just going to cheat and just put a whole bunch of code I had previously typed, same code as before. But the cool thing with this, we can start to talk about some of those new features. So one thing, it's been like this for a while, but one thing I don't know that a lot of people knew, report line styles. I'm typing it and renaming the node, but it's also renaming my editor. So if you're like me and you often have 5, 6, 12 Python editors open at the same time, first, don't be like me. Second, make sure you're renaming your nodes so that you can sort of keep an eye on which one of those Python nodes is what.
So Jacob, what's coming down the pipes is the ability to dock those or undock those as well.
Sweet. Awesome.
So
next piece here is when we hover over these nodes, we usually get basically just input 0 as the tooltip, but now we can right click on that. There is a bit of a sort of alignment bug that we still have to track down, but we'll get this edit port properties, and now we can start to give those pieces names. So we'll name this one toggle. Tooltip will set as any adjustable inputs to re-trigger node execution. There we go. And now you can see it's renamed that. And when I hover, it tells me exactly what it was that I typed there. So the great thing with this is it makes it much easier for end users to reuse those Python scripts that we might have floating around inside our various nodes. They know what it is that they're looking for. We can put our data types in there and all the rest, which is pretty cool. And again, configurable on the outside as well. Note, if you do subtract an input now, you do get this handy little warning that says, hey, your custom port properties will be lost once this port is removed. So you can either not do that and hit cancel and maintain your port and the properties, or hit OK, and then everything's gone. There is no way to get it back. Even with the undo, you can see it's not in the stack. So, all right, there is a question in the chat for Dana and Marco. Of Smith Group's 5% of people making their own stuff, what sort of procedures do you have for the review, and what sort of training, marketing, if any, do you guys have for promoting people making their own tools?
That's a really great question. I will say the people who typically create and modify are on our technology and practice team, on our actual computation group team, but we definitely encourage people to jump in there and figure out Dynamo. If, of course, they can hopefully read them. They're consistent across all of our certified scripts. So if they open up one, it hopefully is similar to the next. And I will say some of our, sorry, please.
No, go for it. Sorry.
Some of our best scripts have been created by practitioners. Some of our best workflows have been created by practitioners. So we usually will work with them specifically on what tools they would like to see automated, what workflows need improvement in some way. And sometimes they come to us and say, hey, we did this, and we'll push it through, right? We'll actually certify those scripts as a technology and practice group, right? We'll ensure that they work with our templates, with our families, with our schedules, all of those things. And we highly encourage that. We just find that as a bonus, right? But we do work with the different disciplines to essentially prioritize different goals and workflows and how best to create automations for them.
We do have a central location that we like calling the script catalog. where anyone is able to upload any scripts they create, be it, you know, Dynamo or Grasshopper or Rhino inside. We do ask them, you know, like to have like a standard format. We just ask like a quick snip of like a picture of what it's doing, like a description, then just add the file. So like anyone who's interested in using that script in any project or anything, they can just download it from there. If there's like a lot of scripts that are just very project specific, they, you know, that's where we usually recommend uploading, because sometimes you can just grab that script and then modify it, you know, for your needs. But sometimes some of those scripts become like something that can be standardized, or, you know, make it generic enough so that you can make it available to everyone. And just that's what Dana refers to with like the certified script process, where we review it and then we make sure that it's up to our, you know, documentation standards, and that it's up to, you know, it's not failing in some edge cases. We try to like catch those edge cases. And that goes back to Jacob's point of like testing. It's like, it's so important to have like your beta group of testers too, right? So that you can always test things first. If something goes wrong, you know, especially with development, something goes wrong, it's just one computer, is not the entire network or everyone's computer. So that's, you know, that's really important to test all your workflows and every, you know, every tool you create before you run.
And especially in the real project world, right? Like in my project, you know, little perfect situation, right? I might catch a few nulls in some places, but it's not necessarily going to give me the full idea of what a project that's modeled to the, you know, 100% CDs might be like. So to finish off that full question, we don't necessarily teach people how to use Dynamo, although you know, if you want to, as a Smith Group employee, you could schedule a time with me at any time, and I would very happily show you how to edit a Dynamo script at the very least. And of course, I have a YouTube channel where I teach people how to create and modify Dynamo. So we definitely try to take advantage of that. But we really rely more on teaching people how to use Dynamo Player. So in addition to the technology hub on SharePoint, where we have a lot of the different articles that point to workflows and how to do it step by step, we also have a 90-minute class. We actually call them innovations. So we have a 90-minute innovation course specifically on how to use Dynamo Player. And I call it discipline agnostic. It doesn't tie to any discipline. It's just, you know, specific to documentation in general. So creating work sets, things that regardless of what discipline you're in, because we're multidisciplinary at Smith Group, you're going to need to do. Change case, as Jacob showed, you know, updating title blocks.
Yep. Yeah, one other thing to note on that, Smith Group's fortunate in that they are really, actually maybe even unique, and there's a lot of communication that goes on at Smith Group. They tend to talk to each other very well. Not all firms are as good at that. So if you're looking to be able to identify who might be authoring graphs on the side and you're just not aware of them, there's a great tool called Binoculars, which is a view extension that you could bulk deploy through the tools that Smith Group's mentioned here to get that onto everybody's system. And then you'll know who's starting up Dynamo, and if they're authoring my amazing generative space planning graph.dyn, you can track that and say, hey, I saw you were doing this. Can we partner on that and do some cool stuff together? So that's one way to kind of get some great stuff. A few more questions in the chat.
I offer the innovation class monthly, and it's offered anytime as a recording. So you can actually get in live once a month and hang out with me, or you can just listen to it at your own cadence and pace.
Nice. Other question that we had in here, which is a little bit earlier, has anyone successfully created a script to extract information from SharePoint? I haven't personally. I don't tend to use too much stuff on SharePoint though. Some interesting possibilities there. Marco,
I have a few scripts that work the first process in the workflow would be to extract it from SharePoint. So you essentially save it down locally. So it's not working from SharePoint data. It's actually reading Excel exports from SharePoint.
Aha. Okay. So you're basically pulling it from SharePoint down to an intermediate file on the local disk. That might be better from a stability.
It's creating snapshots as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think pros and cons to that.
Yeah, very true.
SharePoint is a cloud service. So when you're trying to wrap up those async web requests inside a Dynamo graph, it can get hairy pretty quickly. So.
Yep. That's why I was thinking of doing it off a file that's sort of the snapshot might be a little bit more stable.
I would say that Dynamo today doesn't handle this stuff very well, but the Dynamo of where we want to go is going to start handling web requests and async behaviors better as time goes on.
The innovation class is for Smith Group employees. I definitely encourage you to apply. We're always hiring. We're even looking for a technology and practice person if you'd like to work with me specifically. Definitely join the team. We're always looking for new talent. But you can see up in the chat, Sol put in my my YouTube channel, so you can listen to me anytime on YouTube. Fall asleep, Jimmy. Probably. I mean that in like, I'm boring, not in a.
All right.
Good clarification.
All right. I think that might be everything in the chat. Any other questions before we move on to the wrap up? Going once, going twice.
No, but I will say though that it has been awesome. This has been the most engaged chat we've had probably in a year, even if not long, a year and a half. So big shout out, Dana and Marco. Thank you for that. It's been a very stimulating conversation around all things management for Dynamo. So that's very cool.
Well, and thank you guys. Thanks, Alex, and everybody else who's asked questions.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Cool. Absolute pleasure to have you both here. Thank you so much. And on that note, we do have some new sessions upcoming, and the next series of 3 is going to be really about developing in Dynamo from the creating nodes perspective and then submitting a PR perspective. So the first session is going to have John Pearson as our special guest again, returning just like Dana's returned today. I think this might be John's 3rd session. Discovering a new environment, we're going to be talking about IDEs, so developer environments here, Visual Studio, and so on. In general. Then Zero Touch Hello World is going to be creating the first C# node inside of Visual Studio to use in Dynamo, which is going to be awesome. So Zachary Jensen, who has just joined Autodesk actually, a sort of Civil 3D user who's the author of the Canva package, is going to be there with us for that one. And then the last one in this series is going to be teaming up with the team. So this is actually submitting a PR to Dynamo. We're going to have Michael Kirshner, who's on the Dynamo team, be a part of this one. And we're going to submit a real PR to Dynamo that is going to make it through and actually show up inside a product. So coming full circle for our entire series to wrap up 2 years worth of awesomeness before we figure out where we're going to go next with this series. And ideally, we're looking to get more community people coming to talk. So like today with Dana and Marco, we'd love to have you come and talk about all of the awesome stuff that you do in Dynamo as we move through the series moving forward.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that PR session. It's going to be game changing even for me. So really looking forward to that.
Lots of things to know.
I'm really excited for that Dynamo node. That's amazing. now you can rename the inputs and outputs. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been a long time coming.
All right, so we will wrap up. This is just other ways that everybody on this call can get involved in the community. We have our socials, and then we also have different ways, our forums, our groups, our blogs, and things like that everyone can go and get involved in. We also have, sorry about that, I have dogs and they have very bad timing. But
Leah didn't even make an appearance.
We do also have the community conversations link right there where you guys can go and propose your own community conversations.
Thanks for having us again, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It was a blast, and looking forward to seeing everybody in a couple of weeks.